It's important to remember as we keep talking about random sampling that your sampling must be random for you to do any inference at all. Okay, remember inference is where, like what we did in a hiring discrimination, where we said, how does this help us answer our question? In order to do that at all, you have to have random sampling. Otherwise, your results could be filled with all sorts of bias. However, just because it's random sampling doesn't mean it has to be the simple random sampling that we talked about in the last video. Simple random sampling, or SRS, remember, is the most basic and the most popular type of sampling. However, it is not the only type. There are two other types that are tested on the AP test, stratified and cluster. And there's one other type that we're going to talk about just because it is very useful to know, called systematic sampling. All of these are types of random sampling if done together, if done correctly. Okay, a stratified random sample is what happens when you split your population into groups that we call strata. The goal for these strata is that you want them to be as similar as possible within the group. Okay? You want within group similarities. And then what's going to happen is when you have your strata that have similarities within the group, you're going to then take the strata and do a simple random sample within each strata. So I'm going to split my population into these groups, and then within each group I'm going to pick a few people to sample by either using a random number table or by putting all their names in a hat and drawing out however many I need. Okay, that's a stratified random sample. It's beneficial to use a stratified random sample if you know that you have groups in the population that have different views or different ideas about what it is you're researching. Okay, so let's talk about some examples of this. One example might be anyone who does a telephone survey. Okay, these days telephone surveys are not as simple as they used to be because of cell phones. Many people don't have home phones anymore. Many of them just have cell phones. Some people have cell phones and home phones, and some people only have home phones. And if you think about differences within those groups, a lot of it has to do with age. For example, I only have a cell phone. My mother has both, and my grandmother only has a home phone. So it stands to reason that generally, though not all the time, the older you get, the more likely you are to have a landline, the less likely you are to have a cell phone. So if I am asking questions, depending on what my question is, if I think that my answer would be different depending on what age they are, I may want to stratify by the type of phone I'm calling. So I make sure that I call some cell phone users and some landline users. If I just did a simple random sample, theoretically I could get all of one kind or the other. Okay, so in a stratified random sample, the benefit is that I know that every group is represented. Okay. In a cluster sample, you are still splitting them into groups. You're splitting them into, split the population into clusters. Then, okay, and in this case, you want the cluster, each cluster, to mirror the population. So you want differences within the cluster. So, for example, I might do clusters. If I wanted to sample school I might cluster by homeroom, because homerooms generally have a variety of different people in them. You're more likely going to mirror the school. So rather than cluster sampling by AA groups, because I know that there are specific similarities within AAs. All of them are in the same grade. So homerooms would be better for clusters. Advisory classes would be better for stratified. So here what I do once I split it into clusters is I take my groups, and instead of sampling a few from each one, I'm going to randomly pick, using a number table or a random number generator, randomly pick one of these groups, or however many I need, and I'm going to sample everyone in that group, and that will be my sample. Okay, so some other differences between some other examples might be, let's say I'm polling, doing a poll about Social Security reform. Okay, let's say I have this group of people that I'm polling that are in the food court at the mall. A good stratified method would be to stratify by age. So I have all the elderly people in a group, all the middle-aged people in a group, all the younger people in a group, because younger people are going to have a very different view of Social Security reform than older people because it's further down the road from them. It affects them less at the moment. Okay? If I was clustering, okay, gender is not such a big deal, but age is. So a cluster idea may be that I cluster by gender, and then depending on the gender I pick, I know that everyone in that group would probably be a bunch of different ages. So I'd have a wide age range. However, for that to work, you'd have to make sure gender did not have an impact on it. The big thing for the AP test is to be able to explain why you chose a variable to stratify by and why you stratified by that variable, or why you chose to cluster and what groups you chose to cluster. You need to be able to explain the choices that you make. Okay, if you're still a little bit confused about the two, think about it as in terms of salads. Okay, let's say that I'm a salad quality inspector. Okay, if I go into McDonald's to test their salads, I am going to use a cluster sample. Okay, I'm going to take a couple different salads out of their refrigerator that are already pre-made, and I'm going to eat the whole salad to inspect it. I'm not going to pick the onions out of one salad and the lettuce out of another salad and the tomatoes out of another salad. Okay, that makes no sense, and it ruins a whole lot of salads. Instead, I'm going to pick one or two already boxed up salads and eat the whole thing. Okay, that's a cluster sample. So already boxed up salads, I'm going to pick one or two, and I'm going to sample every ingredient in that salad. Okay, then let's say I go to Ruby Tuesdays, where they have the salad bar. If I need to sample their ingredients, I'm going to get a few things off of each piece of the salad bar. Okay, that is a stratified random sample. So I take a couple tomatoes, I take a couple pieces of lettuce, I take a couple of croutons, take a couple of cucumbers. Okay, I randomly sample a couple of every different type of ingredient. That is stratified. So think about it. If you get confused between stratified and cluster, since they both talk about splitting into groups, think, what type of salad am I eating? Stratified is a salad bar. Clustered is like a prepared salad. Okay, those are the two AP topics. The non-AP topic is systematic. Okay, systematic is very helpful just because it's easy. But for a systematic, what you do is you stand in one place where a lot of people are, bound to walk through, or you are looking at your list of people to talk to or things to observe, and you're going to say, I'm going to ask every blank person, okay? Every third person, every fourth person, every fifth person. And no matter what happens, you count, and every fifth person, you ask them your questions. Now that if they say no, then you count 5 more and ask that person. Okay, but whatever number you choose, that many people, you ask your questions. That is what a systematic sample is. Okay, this one, not going to be on any test or anything. I just want you to know about it because it's a popular one and it's very handy. Okay, so let's talk about some examples, or let's look at an example. The manager of this beachfront hotel wants to survey guests in the hotel to estimate their customer satisfaction. There's all these different rooms. They have 2 towers. The south one is older. The north one is newer. Each tower has 10 floors of standard rooms. Okay, there's 40 rooms per floor. And 2 floors of suites. Okay, so half of the rooms face the beach. The other half face the street, which means that there are 880 total rooms. Okay, if he wanted to take a simple random sample of 88 rooms, what he's going to do, and remember you can pause this and answer these questions and then play it, but what he's going to do is he's going to number each room 001 through 880. Remember that your numbers on your labels have to be correct. Okay, they have to have the same number of digits. Then he's going to use Table D, or a random number generator, and choose 88 of these rooms, 88 of these numbers. And he's going to go to those rooms. If he gets repeats, he's going to put them back and try again. Okay, that's how you would do a simple random sample. A stratified random sample, we need to think about our strata. Okay, if I go by towers, one's older and one is newer. If I stratify by tower, I still may end up with all of one type of room. I might have them both have rooms in both towers, but I may end up with all of the standard rooms, or I may end up with all suites. Okay, or if I stratify by just floors, then I may end up with some that face the street, all of them face the street, or all of them face the beach, or I may only have rooms from one tower. So really what I need to do is stratify by room type. There are 8 different room types because there's the south and the north. So there's 2 towers, and each tower there are 2 types of rooms, suites and standard. And then each of those you can either face the street or the beach. And hopefully you remember from probability from previous classes that if I want to know how many different combinations there are, I multiply and I get 8. So I want to stratify by my 8 types of rooms. Okay, so why would 2 of 24 different floors not be a good way to obtain a cluster? Okay, remember I want clusters to mirror the population. All of the rooms on each of these floors is the same type of room. So I could end up with all suites or all standard rooms. Okay, which means I would be leaving or underrepresenting part of my population, and which is always a bad thing. So I would not want to use a cluster sample in this case, because no matter how I clustered them, tower, floor, etc., I would always end up I could always end up with all of one type or the other. Okay, let's real quick talk about tips for knowing which, like talking about the sampling types. The SRS is simple, but it has a chance of overrepresenting or underrepresenting. Okay, but it's the easiest one to do of these three. Stratified is really more complicated, but you have no risk of underrepresenting or overrepresenting. And a cluster is the one of the easiest, but it also could over and underrepresent. Okay, so those are your three options. You just need to know information about all three of them. Okay, so to check your understanding questions, hopefully you're going to pause this, do the questions, and then look at the answers. The first one, why can you not take a simple random sample of the 200 people at a NBA game? Is because, one, it's time consuming. It would probably take you the whole game, if not longer. So that would be a problem. And B, the other bad thing about it is that most people don't stay in their seats. You may go to one of your randomly selected seats, and that person may be in the restroom or in the concession stand. So that would just delay you even further. So a simple random sample in this case, not a good idea. So then the question is, if I'm going to stratify, is it best to stratify by rows or by numbered sections? So, and in this case, to stratify, it's best to stratify by rows. The reason for that is that because the rows are all, like everyone in a row is typically the same distance away from the court, which means their seats are going to cost about the same. So if I stratify by row, I'm going to get a couple of people in every different price range. So I can make sure that every price range of tickets is represented. Okay. If I'm going to cluster sample, I want to make sure I cluster sample by the numbered sections, like section 203 or section 201, because numbered sections contain all of the different rows. So if I randomly select one numbered section out of the arena and ask everyone in that section, I can also be sure that I'm hitting every price range. Okay, so those are the alternative types of sampling methods other than the simple random sample.